Do you know who Michael's son is? He's
You're Michael's son.
I am the Michael's son. Nitty gritty, VLSI, digital finance, blockchain, fintech. Disruptive and interesting, impactful moment in the history of humanity right now. It's a time to buckle up your seatbelts.
Thank you, Michael, for joining me. Thank you for finding time for this interview. I was really looking forward to this one.
It's a pleasure, man. This is it's great to be in your new car. Yeah.
And it's interesting that actually we meet right before the lockdown, and now we're meeting right after the lockdown.
That's right. Historic.
Yeah. And to give a little bit of context to viewers and listeners, Shanghai was locked for over 2 months, and that's why I'm super excited to see other human beings in person again. Michael, you wear lots of hats. You're very active in the community. But before we speak about what keeps you busy, I would love to ask you, where did you graduate from? What was your first work experience? And if at that time you would think that one day you will be running many companies in Shanghai and investing in many businesses.
Okay. Yeah, so I kind of a technical dude. Went all the way from a bachelor's to PhD at MIT. Spent a lot of time at the computer science and AI lab, doing microprocessor design. So basically supercomputer design and next generation microprocessor, really nitty gritty VLSI, things like that. I kind of did about 3 years there and then kind of ran out of steam and kind of decided to do something different. So I ended up at the MIT Media Lab, which is kind of famous for doing all sorts of crazy stuff, right? Nanotechnology, 3D printing, a lot of the early sort of digital media stuff came out of there. And I was, in a lab called the Human Dynamics Group, and did actually a lot of the early wearable computing stuff came out of that group. Actually, colleagues of mine started Apple Watch and Google Glass and Samsung Gear. And So it's kind of quite influential. I was the guy who did the early pre-Fitbit stuff, right? So probably one of the first to do what we now call quantified self, right? Kind of instrument the body with a lot of physiology, and I created the first quantitative depression monitor, right, to be able to quantify depression using wearable technology and things like that. So, back then, really kind of got into startups, right? MIT had a very famous competition called the 50K competition. It was the premier tech competition in the country at the time. Now I think it's called the 100K, but way back then it was 50K because you got $50,000 and access to a bunch of VCs, right? So I started, every year applying for that. I probably was one of the most prolific, competitors. I probably did that 6 years straight because I was in the PhD program, right? So every year I would do it. 1 year I was a finalist and I did quite well with one of my companies. And so after I graduated, my paths were either to become a professor, go to Wall Street and do quant stuff, join a big tech company. And I chose option 4, which was do startup stuff. So my father is kind of like a major industrialist in synthetic diamonds. And so I just started building companies with him. He was like the mad scientist, with the patents. Our family patent portfolio is like 600 patents. And I would take those early patents and then, commercialize them, find the startup funding, build the team, do the applied research, build the manufacturing, scale the business, that kind of thing. The 0 to 1 nuts and bolts of doing startup stuff. So over the last 15 years, I've probably started half a dozen companies with my father. Semiconductor consumable company, LED packaging company, chip thermal management company. So a few of these type of things. Right?
That's pretty exciting.
Yeah, and then the last part is while I was still in grad school, I had the opportunity to join a program called MISTI, which was a China program to help teach kids in Shanghai. And that was really early. That was in 2001, I believe, right? So I came to China for my first time in 2001, almost 20 some years ago. And it was really eye-opening, right? I knew that at that time, even early time, that China was really going to take off, and really it was in the back of my mind that I wouldn't find opportunity there. And it was only in 2010, though, that I started my LED packaging company. My first company in China was to build a big manufacturing center for LED, which was really hot back then. A lot of government support, that kind of thing. So that was my first experience in Shanghai, and I've basically been in and out of Shanghai for the last 10 years. I never left. Yeah.
Oh, wow. You mentioned about the program 50K, right? You know Alvin Wan from HCC? I think he also got the same program, right?
Of course.
We had the interview, he also was talking about it.
Yeah, okay.
Oh, yeah, exactly, the STAR team. And to give a little bit understanding actually how busy you are and how lucky I am to secure a time in your schedule, can you tell a little bit more about what do you do at the moment and which projects actually you spend more time on?
Yeah. These days I actually do have a wide portfolio. Like I'm a professor, right? So I started the Fintech Research Center at the Fanhan International School of Finance. So recently I just moved over to Zhejiang University at the International Business School and started the Institute of Digital Finance Innovation. So basically, I'm doing a lot of digital finance stuff these days. I kind of morphed myself over the years from kind of tech ecosystem startup guy to almost laser focused in digital finance, blockchain, fintech, right? For a while, I was taking a lot of innovation from abroad as a more of a commercial entrepreneurial guy. I'm kind of like built for thinking about how to commercially scale things. I was focused on taking a lot of international companies and trying to help them to establish a presence in China, right, and actually do scale their business in China. These days, it's almost the other way around, right? Now it's a bunch of Chinese companies that want to go abroad, and so I kind of reversed polarity, and I kind of very focused on digital finance. And so I have a company called Carbon Blue Innovations. You can think of it as a venture building investment platform. So this is where I take a lot, I kind of tend to work with infrastructure companies, fundamental infrastructure companies that have a broad applicability in this new digital currency, digital asset world, right? And then I become the joint venture partner. I basically usually take a role to build out the Asia presence or the greater China presence, and then I basically do the A to Z thing to venture build. I call it venture building, to basically take the core technology, which should have like a sort of a 10x advantage, right? It's either 10x faster or more efficient, or it has some very key capability like interoperability, and then I commercially scale those businesses. So that's what Carbon Blue does, and in the last 2 years I've been incubating two major efforts from that. One is called FreeFlow Finance, which is trying to take a play in this sort of new digital currency world and trying to create essentially a universal payment API to connect all these digital currencies together, allow them to clear and settle, even do the institutional DeFi thing so that we can get FX provision. And then, I'm kind of doing a land grab, basically connecting to all the payment rails and digital wallets and super apps, mostly in the developing world, in ASEAN and Africa, and trying to be that sort of next generation, cross-border payment layer, right? And then I have another company doing basically digital asset investment banking type stuff, right? Called Horizon Digital, and we're looking at, for example, digital green bonds, how to take securities like bonds and stocks and to digitize and tokenize them, and also carbon credits. And there's a very unique play here because China's really taking the lead in green finance, wants to be carbon neutral by 2060, and at the same time opening up its capital markets at this very unique time in history. And so one of the hallmarks of what I do is trying to be that sort of connector between East and West, right? In this case, taking Chinese assets and things like this, and to try to find international buyers and things like that. So that's what's happening in Carbon Blue. And then I have a venture fund called Lucid Blue Ventures, and it's a digital asset themed fund. And so we're investing in a lot of, the fundamental infrastructure for Metaverse and Web 3.0, right? So DeFi infrastructure, NFT infrastructure, a lot of gaming infrastructure, and then everything's basically considered Metaverse these days. And there's a specific focus, again, on kind of modulating between different things. So there's a lot of innovation in, I would say, the unregulated crypto world, which is very interesting. But as you can see in the recent events in the last month or so, there's a lot of bad behavior, and it's not quite really up to par in terms of institutional grade stuff, right? And so I focus on the companies and the opportunities to be able to take that raw innovation and then develop more solid type technologies that's regulated, that has KYC and all these controls that will allow massive institutional adoption of digital assets.
Wow. Do you have enough time to sleep?
I'm doing okay these days. Yeah.
How many hours?
Yeah, I do about 6 usually.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So that's the habit. Yeah. I ask this question from time to time because we have viewers, entrepreneurs, right? And they're trying to adjust their schedule to follow the good patterns, right? The patterns that actually works for people.
Yeah.
One thing that is particularly very amazing, and I find it very interesting, that you work with different organizations, different entities, from startups to corporates to governments, and the approaches are different, work style is different, pace is different, and you work with organizations from different countries, from different cities. So how do you actually manage to do it, and what's your secret sauce?
So actually, I think that's it's a very good question, and I think what I've tried to do, I guess, maybe not even consciously, right, but where I ended up was sort of at the sort of intersection of things, right? And I think that intersection to modulate between one industry to the other, or one region to the other, or one discipline to the other, is where a lot of innovation can happen. I call it innovation arbitrage, right? Because if you, for example, take the algorithm here in this industry and then you apply it to the finance industry, you're not actually doing most of the hard work. The algorithm's already done. You just need to get access to the data in this industry. But that is that connecting those two pieces is can win you the Nobel Prize, or things like this, right? So I tend to focus on these sort of areas of innovation arbitrage, and there's a few major axes of that, right? One is you can tell already the sort of connecting East and West, right? So just by taking a world-leading technology in Europe or in Israel or in other parts of the world and connecting to the China ecosystem, or vice versa, taking Chinese technology applied to ASEAN or other places, there is that sort of arbitrage opportunity, innovation arbitrage opportunity. So I like to do that kind of thing. The second is I have a technical background, right? Having gone to MIT, doing a lot of computer architecture stuff. So I'm proficient at the technology, but how to translate that into, say, finance, right? There's also a gap in terms of communication and culture and understanding. And so being able to arbitrage between that is important. And then the third probably area is kind of between the academic side, right? The industry side and the government side, right? And if you can kind of connect the government to industry, or academics to industry, or academics to government, that sort of little triangle brings bears a lot of fruit. So for example, I'm now leveling up these days in sort of not NGO type circles. So I host a forum at Davos every year on the future of fintech and finance. I'm also advising the UN on digital finance topics in the Asia Pacific. And in Hong Kong, I'm advising the government on the digital currency strategy. So they have a lot of need, and technology is absolutely disrupting, but they don't know exactly what to do. So how to connect the technology and the ecosystem is really where it's at. So yeah, I mean, I think the skill set is to be that able to interpolate between these various things. I think that would be an important skill to have, right? And over the years, I've developed this, I mentioned before, this sort of venture building process. Okay, it's a very kind of lean methodology, entrepreneurial process that will allow me to scale innovations very quickly. And part of that formula is that I work with the key people to be able to make it happen. I'm not doing all the hard work myself.
Right.
So, for example, with Carbon Blue, in the modern parlance, you would think of it as a DAO, actually. It's a network of superheroes, right? A superhero that knows the technology, a superhero that knows the regulatory environment, superhero that can do the operations, superhero that can find the funding, right? And then if I had a superpower, it'd be how to get all these superheroes to play together. Okay, to architect the meta strategy for taking this 10x advantage technology and building a scalable business out of it. One that can get funding, one where all these superheroes get their benefits so that they want to align their interests to this, and then very quickly that we can scale very fast. So I think that is I would consider my sort of key ability that allows me to stitch together all these components and then also to be able to take advantage of how to, with that stitching together, then you create a total solution where the government can actually use it, right? Or the industry will actually use it, whereas before it was just a bunch of tech components. And so you can actually start to get traction and to scale very rapidly if you have the right formula. Yeah.
You already mentioned fintech a few times, right? So fintech actually is a big scope of what you do.
Yeah.
And you have tremendous experience in this field. That might be a little bit a big question, but if you can compare fintech in the West and fintech in Asia, what's similar, what's different, and where do you see the future of fintech?
I think it's like this, right? Fintech in general is disruptive across all industries and worldwide, right? It's essentially a general purpose technology that's going to level up society to do things much more efficiently. It's such a fundamental aspect of the digital economy because you need to be able to get access to funds. You need to be able to do transactions. You need to be able to invest in things, right? So this is very, very fundamental. I think the primary difference between the Western style fintech and Eastern style fintech is in the West, things develop first. Okay, so it had a head start, which is good, but also that I think is a little bit of an Achilles heel, because what happens is the industry structure and sort of the legacy situation, specifically with the old business models and their I would say inertia for change is very strong. So, for example, the fintechs that have done very well in the United States and Europe that are they're all unicorns tend to be sort of incremental fintech type plays, right? So, for example, Stripe or Square, right? They have totally enabled. They're huge, right? But they've totally enabled merchants to use old credit card technology, right, which is decades old technology, right? And the other thing is the companies tend to be relatively siloed because of the industry structure. You have a guy like Facebook, right, doing social media, and then you have people coming and doing payments like Venmo, and all the data and all the interaction is siloed into these these tranches, right? Contrast that with in Asia and in the East, because infrastructure was so poor, right? And they're very much behind. It's basically their biggest advantage is a huge blank slate. And so when a technology like digital wallet technology comes in, or digital assets come in, there's massive adoption and ability to actually reframe how the dynamics of the industry go. So in the East, you see these like leapfrog type scenarios, right? They just go directly to mobile wallets rather than trying to go through the telecoms or the banks or through big tech fins like Facebook, right? And then the other opportunity really is, again, because of the blank slate nature of these things, totally different ways that data and cross-industry plays are also available. So the concept of a super app, right? WeChat and Alipay having 1 billion users each in China, but then you got Gojeks and Grabs, and even in the Middle East, you got Careem, where you have a single company that's doing like literally a couple dozen things, right? They're doing payments, they're the social media app. They also do hotels and airline tickets and the delivery and taxi cab service, right? And it's all in one super app, and there's a huge advantage to that because of the data integration capabilities. If we're now, everything's about big data, everything's about automation and AI, and being able to get access a much deeper, richer data set across industries to understand how consumer behavior works and things like that, and then to be able to use the modern AI techniques to be able to and big data techniques to be able to mine that is a huge systemic advantage. Yeah.
And let's talk a little bit briefly about blockchain. China loves blockchain and China hates blockchain at the same time. And blockchain as technology is welcome here in China, and blockchain as the crypto side and the decentralization idea is probably not really welcome. How do you see this impacting the development of the whole industry? And if you see local entrepreneurs and innovators choose other places to build their ventures?
Yeah, so this is very interesting. I think there's a little bit of a misconception of the government stance of blockchain. So let me maybe clarify that, right? The Chinese government is extremely pro blockchain overall. Okay, as a technology, you can think of blockchain as the next generation internet technology that allows the trusted and transparent sharing of data and digital assets and information, right? And framed from that standpoint, Chinese government is 100% supportive. You even have President Xi Jinping, himself stating at the end of 2019 that blockchain is a national priority, and it really is. It's basically you can think of it as the infrastructure of infrastructures that allow you to connect all the various IT systems and data repositories and things like that, such that you can do very scaled and refined things. China is probably the only place that in the world that has real credible smart cities deployment, right? Not just little toy, kind of things. I've been to smart cities conferences dating back almost 15 years, and it's usually just a lot of research topics, or like at most they might do a little demo, NASA style, with some analytics and stuff like that. But it's not, I would say, very scaled commercially, right? But in China, they're really doing that, and the key fundamental technology is the blockchain technology to be able to take all these systems and connect them together, right? So to be clear, China's very pro on blockchain. Where I think we get confused is confounding unregulated crypto, okay, with regulated digital assets. Okay, so China is indeed not very down with unregulated crypto. Okay, so you see they banned the exchanges in 2019. They subsequently banned all ICO activity, and then in the more recent incarnation in 2020, they pushed out Bitcoin mining, and they're actually doing a crackdown on companies that are really obviously in the space, right? So there is a very strong anti-crypto sentiment, okay? But if you peek behind the hood, okay, China is setting up very strongly to do regulated digital assets. Okay, we have the ECNY, right, to set the base of transactional settlement with what we call central bank digital currency. China's leading the world in that. It's almost been a decade of development. They're way ahead in terms of scaled deployments to be able to find use cases for it, etc. And then, but beyond that, okay, I don't know, I think most people in the sort of West don't realize China is seriously experimenting with digital assets. Okay, we're talking the major policy banks, big asset management companies, they're all experimenting with tokenization. And right now it's not fully regulated. Okay, so these tokenization experiments are, experiments. They're kind of interdepartmental within the company. There's no real exchanges and scaled use cases, but that's around the corner, right? We have Yao Chen, who was the founding director of the Digital Currency Institute. He's the father of the DCEP, the Digital Currency Electronic Payment Project, which became the ECNY. He's now over at the CSRC, which is the China Securities Reform Commission. That's the SEC of China, right? And now he's deploying blockchain infrastructure to register digital securities. Okay, so it's only a number of years before China basically digitizes all of stocks and bonds, let's say, right? And also the PBOC is already created a blockchain system to do trade finance. And it's the largest in the world. Last I heard, a couple of years ago, it was already in the sort of $20 billion transactional settlement range, right? So China's moving heavily ahead with regulated digital assets and deploying blockchain at a massive scale. I think it's basically the only place in the world, in my opinion, where really scaled use cases for blockchain is first going to, find some traction. Yeah.
Thank you for clarifying that. NFTs, Metaverse, Web3, big buzzwords, and it's hot topics for already quite some time. Investors are pouring money, startups building their own metaverses. Everyone is launching collections of NFTs. But in the wake of recent events, where we have growing tension between countries, where we have economy slowing down, the consequences of the pandemics, where do you think it's all going, and what will happen to the metaverse in 2-3 years, in your opinion?
Yeah, so I mean, metaverse is one of those things, like it's kind of like a buzzword, right? And it's such a catch-all, right? Metaverse, in my opinion, encompasses all the key exponential technologies which are going to matter in the next decade or so, right? So things like AI, big data, blockchain, cloud computing, IoT, right? Virtual world, AR, VR. All this stuff is some aspect of infrastructure for metaverse, right? So right now, I think it's early. I mean, McKinsey just did this report. It's going to be a huge, I think it was like $30 trillion market because it's a catch-all of all the subcomponents of metaverse. But we're in very, very early days, right? I would say even the big guys like Facebook and Tencent and all the people who should be the leaders of metaverse, I think they have, in my opinion, relatively naive strategies for what the future will be, right? So it's the same way in the first digital revolution. In the early days of internet, you probably would not have been able to predict, what happened in social media and also all these brand new use cases that have come out since, right? So we can only speculate. But I would say, to address your point, we live in very unique times, okay? I would argue probably the most disruptive and interesting, impactful moment in the history of humanity right now. Why would I say this? Because all the things that you mentioned, right? Huge geopolitical tensions. Okay, we got the two big superpowers of the world now bifurcating their strategy instead of coming together. It's a big shame, but it just does seem to be the trend, right? And coupled with that is probably what will be historically the largest economic crisis in the history of humanity. Okay, this is going to beat the Great Depression in 29 or 30 in the 30s, right? And it's systemic. Okay, we have money printing by all the central banks at a scale that you haven't seen. We have trade breaking down because of geopolitical tensions, and not only that, but probably the largest pandemic crisis in history as well, right? So it's going to be a huge time of turbulence and volatility, and then couple that to the fact that technology disruption is coming. At this, all these technologies are exponential. Okay, they tend to double in performance or halve in cost. They've been doing it for, in some cases, decades. AI has been around since the 1960s, and it was only DeepMind bringing it to really human grade level of pattern recognition capability. And so that inflection point for a lot of these technologies are all coming together. Just in the last few years, okay? AI technology, cloud computing technology, and now digital assets, Web 3.0, 5G, and it's all coming together at the same time. And so how this technology disruption, disrupts industries, but at the same time, comes together in the metaverse is also a very, very interesting topic, right? And so all these things basically have pushed digitization, okay? COVID, actually in fintech, the popular saying is that 10 years of fintech growth happened in the space of a year and change over COVID, because that has catalyzed the people's need to be digitized. Offline businesses have suffered dramatically, but online businesses have up until recently had tripled in market value, right? And so digitization is a major force, and things like Zoom calls and stuff like that. People are now more accustomed to going online to socially interact, to conduct business, and to do trade and things like this. And so that's a big catalyst, right? So the digital economy is roughly 40% of developed economies like the US and China. And that's up from 0% like 20 years ago when the internet first started, right? And that's a unilateral trend, and now that trend is accelerated, okay? And now those technologies that enable the metaverse to happen are not only becoming much more practical in use cases, but now they're starting to synergize, right? Because, for example, with blockchain maturing after 10 years of development, that blockchain again is the infrastructure that allow you to aggregate data. And with that data aggregation, the AI algorithms and the big data techniques become much more powerful, right? So all of that's coming to a head right now in 2022, right? And so I think it'll be, it's a time to buckle up your seatbelts, right? We all have front row seats to what's going to happen in the next 5 to 10 years. It's going to be spectacular. There's going to be a lot of disruption. But I think at the very end of it, I think human society is going to be much better off for it, and it's going to be a sort of an inflection point to all sorts of very, very interesting things. Yeah.
And the final one, to finish on the positive note, what the most exciting part for you about the metaverse, and what are some of the projects that you're also excited about and we all need to check out?
Yeah. So yeah, like I said, I have Lucid Blue Ventures, and we probably invested in about 100 projects in the last year and a half, over the last sort of bull run of Bitcoin that had happened. So a lot of DeFi infrastructure. We invest in a lot of NFT infrastructure, a few NFT marketplaces, next generation NFT projects. Notably, I might just name drop. There's a protocol called Particle Protocol. So if you look at NFTs these days, they're primarily static, right? Either just a JPEG for your Bored Apes, or at most a video kind of loop, a GIF or something like this. We are now creating through Particle the compostability for NFTs, right? So we can take your Bored Ape, and then we can take some LV limited edition sunglasses NFT, and we can compost it together, and then we can even add full programmability, right? So we can put a flashing display or a light effect display, some sort of visual effect kind of thing. We can even package in a mini Uniswap applet so that so there's some digital asset functionality in there that happens as well. I'm working on creating sort of ad functionality, so interactive ads that can do things that all packaged into a compostable, unified, particle, we call it, right? So I think that's very interesting, sort of next generation NFT stuff. We're also investing into a lot of, it's evolving so fast. It went from DeFi to GameFi, right? Gaming and NFTs and adding the financial component, DeFi component was very important. But that very quickly morphed into SocialFi and social interactions and how we can enable them through DeFi. And now that's morphing into SportsFi, and everything's now Metaverse. So there's a lot of very interesting plays. Another company I might drop is Metaverse, right? So everybody is doing NFT projects, but if you really want to scale the NFT market, you need to have a bunch of NFTs, right? And right now, NFTs are mostly done by NFT production houses. You have this very bespoke, small-scale elite team doing, an NFT collection for Louis Vuitton or another brand, right? Doesn't scale very well, right? So what Metaverse does is now it allows you to latch onto the creator economy. It allows a brand like LV to specify the characteristics of their NFT that will be compliant to what their brand vision is, right? But then with that sort of meta framework, then they can get 10,000 creators to be able to create NFTs to spec, and then so they can and then there's some sort of profit sharing business model where the creators get most of it, but the brands get some of it, and the metaverses which allow those NFTs to be dropped in also get a cut. And so there's a nice way to be able to scale the deployment, distribution, and creation of NFTs, right? So we're really focused, Lucid Blue, to be in that space, okay? To think about the infrastructure, think about the next generation sort of capabilities, right? And we're really a venture building fund as well. So not only are we investing into these fundamental capabilities and infrastructure, but then we're taking our own portfolio companies and techno Lego bricking them together to venture build our own projects, right? So an example of that is we're in the process of creating our own GameFi as a service, right? So we have invested in digital wallet technologies, for example. Another portfolio company of ours is called GoPocket. They're like the 360 team, which is a antivirus technology team. So very strong in antivirus technology, but combining that with digital wallet technology, we can create a next generation digital wallet which can inoculate the wallets from scams and phishing attacks, right? So if a single digital wallet gets phished, usually there's a contagion and it can spread to everyone else. But now with this antivirus technology, it automatically flags, detects, and it basically allows users to not worry about that kind of stuff, right? And this is very important for the adoption of digital assets, right? You need to get to a broader base. You need to get grandmas and unsophisticated people using it. They need to have better tech to protect their privacy and their security, right? And so we have that wallet technology. So what can we do with that? We can take the next generation digital wallet, combine it with the next generation payment technology, combine it with the next generation NFT technology, and compost these together to do brand new things. We want to be a GameFi as a service. So instead of every game having to develop their own tech stack how inefficient and unoptimal, right? We create a platform that allow the gaming companies to do what they do best, which is the game design, and then have all the infrastructure taken care of for them. And I'm also looking at next generation. Here's my notion for web. I'll end by saying this is my notion for Metaverse and Web 3.0. Okay, which is to say, right now is in its the very embryonic stages, right, where everybody's trying to do NFTs, marketplaces, and stuff like that. That's a first mover, but I think as we get more sophisticated, we need to, in my opinion, really focus on the financialization layer for the metaverse. Okay, because if you have a digital economy and you don't have the financialization layer set, you don't really have the ability to transact. To be able to make payments and to be able to package these digital assets in ways and then use digital finance techniques to be able to monetize this thing. And without that monetization aspect, then you have limited impact, right? So these days, the whole Web 3.0, at least the crypto side of these things, is focused on NFT marketplaces, right? So that's like old internet 1.0 eBay type, mindset, right? Or selling virtual land, right? In my opinion, virtual land is not very sustainable because there's not actually any deep, sustainable underlying dynamic that's going on. Social interaction, right? If you go to Decentraland or Sandbox, it's like a ghost town. There's a bunch of structures built up, but there's not anybody doing anything in it, really. So I think these kind of concepts are sort of transitionary business models as we get to the real Web 3.0, real Metaverse, which is, again, much more sophisticated social dynamics, or things like advertising model. Advertising model in the Metaverse is still, I think, pretty old school, right? It's just banner ads and what Google had done, or actually, frankly speaking, it's evolution of outdoor advertising, which has been a decades-old phenomenon. But what's the next generation, ad infrastructure for Web 3.0? We're venture building that project, a project called Project Metafy, where we're using particles, compostable NFTs to create interactive ad units, right? And different infrastructure to allow metaverses to be able to scale their ad deployments. And ads is what drove the original internet, right? That's Google's advertising model is what allowed any website to be able to monetize eyeballs on web pages, right? We are in the works to do the same thing for Web 3.0. Yeah.
Wow, that's super cool. Thank you so much, Michael, for this sharing. Very insightful. I personally learned a lot of new things, and you gave lots of food to digest. That's amazing. Thank you so much. That was Between Meetings with Michael Sun. Please comment, share, like, and we see you in the next episode.